Hey everyone, Jack here. I got back a few days ago from Pacific Crest Trail 2025, trail name Triple Threat. This is my gear that made it to the end of the trail. I made a video beforehand. This is going to be the video after of what actually made it back. I had my gear change a decent amount over the trail, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But we'll dive into first what I was wearing on body, which I had booty cap, made it the whole way. Had my wallet, most of the time I lived in my pack. My shoes, so these are my third pair of shoes over the trail. My first two pairs were the Salomon Speed Cross 6. The first pair made it 700 miles to Kennedy Meadows South. The second pair made it to Mount Shasta, same size as the first. I had to go up a full size from size 12 to size 13 at Mount Shasta, and I went to these $65 pair of Under Armour running shoes, and these made it through the whole rest of the trail. I had some pretty extreme wear on these. You can see there's like, these shoes were literally falling apart at the end of that, but we did make it on there. So I did the whole thing in 3 pairs of shoes. Underwear, I switched underwear through it. I have another backup set we'll get into. I switched to shorts at Truckee. The shorts have been nicer for the second part of it. I've enjoyed wearing the shorts, it's just lighter, but I am glad that for in the desert especially, I was wearing the long pants just because they were heavier and they protected me from both all the little scraggly brushes and also from the sun. My sun shirt that I wore every day did make it the whole way. It's showing a lot of wear. The shirt was really nice in the desert because I was able to soak it, and that was helpful when it was really hot, starting late season. This is my long underwear, top and bottom, that I definitely needed at the end of it. It was getting kind of cold in Washington. I only really used it in the Sierras and again in Washington. From about Truckee to Cascade Locks, I actually didn't even have it. I sent it home. But then I had it back, and I had some other gear brought back to me in Cascade Locks for some of the weather stuff. Socks, I went through a decent amount of socks. These are some of my wool socks. I burned a lot of holes in the bottom of socks. We'll go into how many socks I had. My trekking poles made it the whole way. A lot of times I wasn't really actually using them as trekking poles, except for when there was like river crossings or stuff, or if it was like a really steep gradient coming down. Most of the time I was just holding them, but I needed them for my tent, so I had to have them the whole way. And then we'll dive into the contents of my pack. One other thing to note is I had my trail running Ultra Gators. I actually needed to get a second set of these because I burned holes in them that I switched to in Oregon. But I used 2 sets of these. And I used them pretty much every day. That was nice to have. On my shoulder strap, I got my camera, my Sony a6400. I started all 3 of my lenses for it. I only had this one at the end. The Prime 50mm lens is the only lens I actually ended up making all the way. It was just too much weight. I had to save weight somehow. So that was one of the ways I was able to save weight, was getting rid of 2 of my lenses. And then for anything wide angle, I just used my cell phone, a Samsung S25 Ultra. And I kept in my pocket all the time. I kept 4 smart water bottles all the time. Most of the time, especially for the second half, was only ever carrying like 1 or 2 liters of water for the most part, except when it was nighttime. But I liked having the 4 liters on the outside. What I would normally do was I would just only carry as much water as needed during the day, obviously, and then about 6 or so in the afternoon, evening, whatever the last water of the day was going to be, I would fill up all my water, and then I would hike until dark and then set up and dry camp. That worked well for me. I had to switch these out a few times over the trail, but 4 smart water bottles is what I carried for my primary water. On the left side, my kind of general utility pouch in here, and I would keep like snacks and stuff in. I have my Bluetooth headphones live in there, as well as my lens microfiber cleaning cloth. Got a lot of use out of that. And then my camera cap that I didn't really ever use a lot, but I did have it. In the rear one, maintain my water system. So back here, I have a platypus quick draw. I used probably 4 or 5 of these, and I burst several of the bags. I had to get more bags. This is the 2-liter bag. I used the 1-liter and the 2-liter bag. I like both of them. So this is my main water filtration system. And that always lived right there on the outside where I could get to it. And then also in here, dummy corded on, I have my whistle and my nail clippers. And then in this back pocket of it, I have 2 pairs of headphone or earplugs. These were super useful, obviously. There's a few times, especially if you're like camping near roads and stuff, where it can be loud, but most of the time it's pretty quiet at night. But that's what lived in this outside pocket. Over on my right side, the middle pocket here is my Garmin GPS map inReach. I use this a lot, obviously, mostly just for the inReach side. I never really needed it for navigation over my phone, but it was nice to have a redundancy. The front pocket here is where a lot of my small things live. My magnetic compass, which most of the reason I had this was for the mirror, which was useful. But this made it the whole way. My headlamp, my Nightcore like NU25 UL. I really like this headlamp, is what I ended up using, and made it the whole way. USB-C rechargeable and red light capable, which is nice. I used the red light a lot because it would have better battery life. As long as you kept it charged, you get through a full night on the low red light, which is what I liked about it. Because there's a lot of times I had to do night hiking, especially in the desert, and then again towards the end it was getting dark again, like early, the days were getting short, you know, as we got into September. So headlamp, super useful, obviously, you kind of need that. My extra battery for my camera, I started with 3 batteries for my camera. I only had 2 at the end, just this one and the one in the camera. That was one of the other ways I was able to save a little bit of weight. My lighter, I started with like ferrocerium rod and 2 lighters. I sent the ferrocerium rod home early on and only had the 2 lighters. This one here, and it was readily accessible, and then my other one is in my cook system. So that was convenient to have when I could get to easily normally, and then if I was cooking, I obviously used the one that was in my cook system. There was a few times people needed to borrow a lighter, so this was the one that it was easy to get to because it was right there where I get to it. My pen that I needed for journaling. My Benchmade pocket knife. This, honestly, I didn't need this compared to my Leatherman Juice S2. I could have just had the Juice and it would have been fine. That being said, I did like having like normal pocket knife. It was my main knife I would use, and I just never sent it home. But if I were to do it again, honestly, just having like this much a knife is fine, when realistically I'm just using it for like opening food packaging. So yeah, this was so I had 2 knives. That was nice. My little vial of ibuprofen, I use this a little bit. There, especially in the first like month or 2, there was sometimes there was a lot of pain. Towards the end, I really didn't use it a whole lot, but it was nice to have ibuprofen on hand. And I think a chapstick, I never really needed to use this a whole lot, but again, that's just one of those things that's nice to have. And then this back pocket here is, I actually use this to carry like all my electrolytes. So I would sometimes either carry, like, for example, these, like the Liquid IV single-use ones, or a lot of times I would take like sandwich size Ziploc bags and dump electrolyte powder that I bought bulk into those, and I would be able to carry like a Ziploc bag full of electrolyte powder right here on the outside, and then I would just dump that into my bottle when I was filtering water. Again, I like to have all my water stuff accessible on the outside, because most of the time when I'm stopping, it's just for water, and then if I maybe pre-state some snacks in my pockets of my shorts. So a lot of times I'm not digging into my pack. When I do stop, it's able to just grab water, filter it, eat a snack or 2, and then keep moving. That was kind of the way I was doing things. That's kind of all the stuff on the outside of the pack, so now I'll dig into the interior contents. So getting into the pack itself, open the hood back. This is where I kept my sit pad. This made it the whole way. Having a sit pad was very nice. Although most of the time I would just use it as like a table almost in my tent to like rest my like cook cup on. In the hood itself, in this back pocket here, this is one of the items I needed to acquire along trail. This is a little duster bottle for my camera, because I kept having issues with getting dust inside of my lens. This is my trowel and my toilet paper in a bag. and I'll keep right there. I get to it. This is my small little medical kit that made it. I have like an emergency blanket, some gauze, tape, my moleskin, pretty much that. I also have my chemical water filtration tabs in there. I only used them once. The only time I needed them, there was this one like cistern that had like comments about there being like dead rats in it, so I did chemically treat that. But outside of that one time, all of the water I just used a filter on, and I was fine. I never got sick. I have a grocery bag. I acquired a decent amount of these over trail, and I use them for sorting stuff. There's some Ziplocs. These are some gallon ones. There's also some like quart ones. I have a small bag of quarters in here I'll need for like laundry, stuff like that. And this is my little repair kit where I have like my PCT permit, and then I have like repair patches. I have a small sewing kit, my tweezers, my tick remover, stuff like that. That basically lives in here. Most of the time I'm not digging into this, but it is there when I need it. And then I have some sandwich bags here. I use these in Washington for basically bagging my feet, is why I added them for that last stretch. But that's that back one. For front one here, I have these two kits we'll get into in a second. And then I have my sunglasses in here. So I kind of stopped using sunglasses kind of once we got to Oregon. I just didn't really need them. My spoon, this made it the whole way. I have my little thing of rope. I added some extra rope towards the end just because I added my poncho and I was afraid if I needed to like guy that out. So I had some extra rope. Get added back in. These are some of my souvenirs I picked up in Stehekin because this is my pack as it made it to the end. I have my little rubber duck that I acquired along the trail and made it from when I got it. Mosquito head net and electrical tape. All nice stuff to have. I needed the electrical tape in order to like patch up where my sleeping quilt had torn a small hole by one of the straps. So that was one of the things that was helpful for. But that's the hood of the pack. And then in these small, this is my electrical stuff pouch. So in here, what ended up making it, my 110 volt main adapter, my USB-C cables, where I had 2 C to C's and 1 type A to C. Those are my 3 cables that I would carry. And then this is the charging cradle for the batteries for my camera. And then I also ended up with a wired type C pair of headphones, just in case my Bluetooth headphones failed, because I did have to switch those partway through, because I had them fail. So this was, I got concerned if that happened again, it was going to be about headphones. So I did add that to my kit along the way. And then the other little blue bag, this is what I kept my little hygiene kit in. So in here I have a bag of a small little piece of soap. A far cry from the entire full-size bar I started with, but I got bullied into cutting it down into a smaller chunk, and this is what's left of that small chunk. I did not need a full thing. I have a little thing of super glue in here. I used to have a few more, and I would use them for stuff like gluing the Velcro on the back of my new shoes for my trail runners. And then my toothbrush and toothpaste. I was on my second travel size toothpaste. The first one I started with I used the entirety of. And then the only other thing in here is this is the adapter for my water filter so I can back flush it. This is where I kept it. So when I was in town I was able to pull this out and clean my filter up. So let's start digging into the pack. I have a hang tag on the outside too, I'll mention, that I got at the start. We all carry these to show we're through hikers. You have to show your PCT permit in order to get that. I have my light fleece here, just shoved it on top. This was something that I added for Washington, just because I knew it was going to be colder. And I've enjoyed having this. I like wearing that instead of like the down when I'm actually hiking. It's a good light mid-layer to put on and take off. Food bag. In this I would use like those grocery bags, the plastic ones, in order to subdivide stuff in here. Or when I was carrying more than it could fit in here, I would then use those grocery bags to hold food alongside this in the bag. And then as I ate through it, eventually it would all fit in here. So this is just my food, what I had, what's left over of it. More grocery bags. This is Again, one of those grocery bags I would use to carry extra food that I have on the outside. This is my trash bag. I really liked having the 6 Moon Design little zip pouch, and I used it as a trash bag to keep all my trash. I did have a mouse chew a hole into it at one point. I had to tape over, but yeah. So this is a trash bag. I kept it on top where I get to it. This is my journal that I use to keep journaling in. A little bit of a luxury item, but it was worth having for me. My cook system, fuel can, a medium-sized one, and then in here, I would always carry 2 fuel cans. Typically, I would carry one of the small ones that fits in the can, and then one of those medium ones, and I would switch between them when they ran out. So right on top here, I have a couple of my hot cocoa mixes prepared there. My stove itself, the BRS titanium one, I had to get a second one of these because the first one, threads ripped out on me, and I had to get another stove, and then I had to get another one of these sent to me. But so yeah, same stove I started with, but a different one. My other lighter I talked about, I have this here. My little cleaning rag, and then the little fuel can that fits inside the cup. So that's my cook system. Currently, everything in here is bagged into a garbage bag because it was getting wetter towards the end. Most of the time I never bothered when it wasn't going to be wet, but since it was. In here we have my tent system. We'll get into. This is my down quilt in the dry bag, or not my quilt, this is my down vest that I had and that was useful. I used that a lot. Sometimes I would use it as like a blanket, like when I was in the in my quilt, or sometimes it was really cold, I would wear it. My sleeping pad. So I did have a hole in this and then I had to patch early on, but this is just my Thermarest Neo Air X Lite pad, and that made it the whole way. This is my quilt, my Ember quilt from Sea to Summit. This is only a 30-degree rating, which I didn't make it, but there was a lot of points when it was cold. I wish I would have had a little bit warmer of a bag, but this worked. I made it with all my clothes. But that's where I did have to wear my down jacket sometimes in my quilt. This is my clothes bag that we'll get into. This is a USGI poncho. I added this at Cascade Locks for Washington just because I was concerned about having additional rain gear. And this was actually useful because one of the nights in Washington, my tent flooded and it got everything wet, including my sleeping bag. So then the next night, my sleeping bag was still soaked because I wasn't ever able to dry it because it was just raining all day. And I used this as a blanket as well as wearing all my clothes on my pad, and I was able to survive that night. It wasn't the most fun night. Also on that night, a mouse chewed a hole into my tent. So that was just, that was a little bit of a rough time on the trail. But yeah, and then I just have that hole taped over. I need to officially patch it, but I did have a mouse eat its way into my tent. Here's one of my extra pair of dirty socks here. More dirty socks. Again, this is the pack as it came off trail, and another pair of dirty socks. In total, I had 5 pairs of wool socks at the end. I would switch. There was a few times kind of through NorCal and Oregon, I was using these like kind of lightweight like running socks that were low cut, and they were like cotton polyester blend instead of being wool, because it was warm enough it was fine. And I kept at least 1 pair of wool socks always, but towards the end it was just all wool socks as it was getting colder. I have another garbage bag. A lot of times I just keep my quilt in this just to make sure it stayed dry. And then what else is in this bag? Oh yeah, just additional garbage bags that I had as well. And then these are a couple extra grocery bags that I had, and that I kind of had a bunch of them at the end. And then my rain gear, which currently was just shoved in the bottom. So I had rain pants and a rain jacket. I had gotten at Washington. For California and Oregon, I didn't have rain pants, and I only had a lightweight rain jacket. It never really rained a whole lot enough to matter, but in Washington it definitely did. So that's why I did go to this heavier rain gear, and I was glad I did. You see how dirty it is. There's a few times it got a little muddy. And then in the back of where my camelback would go, I have my battery banks. So this is the 10,000 milliamp hour that I started with, and it was taped to 20,000. I switched that other one for this one, this Anchor one that's fast charges over USB power delivery. So that was really nice in town. So this became my main battery bank. So I had those 2 battery banks at the end. And then I had a backup of my water filtration bag because I did have those burst on me, and this just gives me additional water capacity, even though I didn't really need it at the end there. So that's the contents of the pack. Those two other bags we can go into. So in my clothes bag, what's left in here is my wool hat and gloves. This is like USGI glove liners and watch cap. I added these at Washington again when I upped my gear because I knew it was going to be colder. When I started, I just had like a lighter weight beanie, and I never really used it, but I knew I did use this towards the end because it was getting cold. I also have one other pair of socks here, so in total I had 5 pairs of wool socks in Washington. These are my lightweight running shorts. I got these in Idlewild early on because I realized I needed a pair of shorts that I didn't start with, and these were nice just for laundry, or I would wear these swimming and stuff like that. These became my swim trunks. And my second set of underwear. So I had 2 pairs of underwear through it, and I would just switch between them. And then my t-shirt that I had, just made whole way. And that's the clothes bag. And then in my tent system, in here, I have my tent, which was the Six Moon Designs Haven net tent. And then I had my ground sheet, which is a piece of Tyvek. My tent poles or my tent stakes are in this bag, and I had to replace those in Wrightwood because a lot of the ones I started with were the kind of like V-shaped ones, and they would just bend and break on me. But these like aluminum triangle ones with the 3-sided ones I got, these held up pretty well. So I got a bunch of those, and then the only other thing in here is my inflatable Sea to Summit pillow. And that's my gear. It isn't all the lightest, but it's really kind of the minimum amount of stuff I could have. If I were to do it again, I would definitely do it more ultralight. I would need different gear for that. And yeah, that's one of the big things. But I did make it. But yeah, my gear was a little heavy. It's where my trail name Triple Threat came from, because at the start I had 3 of everything. And yeah, we got it pared down to this. This is what we ended up with. And we did make it down the whole trail. Definitely triple the lifetime. So thank you for looking at my gear video. I hope this was interesting and informative to see what actually made it down the trail. And thank you for watching. One last thing I had to share was look at the wear on my hip belt for my Mystery Ranch Metcalf. So I did definitely get some wear here. I mean, the pack made it. I'm gonna have to do some repair work on that, but it did make it the whole way. And I do love my pack. It is not the lightest pack, but the pack did it. So